Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing the documentary The 50, currently streaming on video on demand and hopefully streaming very soon. So briefly, The 50, directed by Brenton Geyser, details the first 50 men to participate in California's Offender Mentor Certification Program. The program was inspired by California's overcrowded prison system. Essentially, the documentary uses this program to explore larger societal issues regarding the American prison system. Through an intense application program, politicians and policymakers believed that by selecting and training 50 men as substance abuse counselors, they could reduce or at least curb the rate of drug addiction. Being part of the first 50 to participate in the program was incredibly dangerous. Inmates often assumed that participants were working with authorities to sell out their fellow inmates. The documentary is very compelling because it interviews members from that first 50 and also current members that are going through the process. Because they had permission to film a number of sessions, it really does feel like you're just sitting in a circle with them, like you feel like a fly on the wall. And a lot of the information that these men are revealing are incredibly personal. And so you become self-conscious and very self-aware that what you're listening to is intensely private. In addition to inmates, the documentary also interviews policymakers as well as prison officials to gain some insight into America's failing prison system. Starting with what I liked, I thought aesthetically the documentary was very impressive. I thought the contrast between past members and current members was very effective in terms of stressing how individuals can make meaningful change if they are given the right opportunity and resources. The documentary also utilizes reenactments of past members' lives. These reenactments are incredibly vibrant, they're very well acted, and they correlate well with each man's story. I felt it made the documentary more compelling because it allowed you to really sympathize with the trauma that these men went through. A part of the reason why the program is so efficient is because it forces inmates to confront their past out loud, because an effective counselor cannot be avoidant or ashamed of where they came from. And they say that you're always one decision away from a totally different life. However, what they don't tell you, sometimes those decisions are totally out of your control. One former member of the 50, Cameron, details his life growing up with a mother that was addicted to drugs. And he explains how he spent his youth avoiding certain streets, avoiding certain people. But when he was forced to move in with his aunt, the type of life that he tried so hard to avoid became inescapable. And even trying to implement programs like this, the prison officials, the policymakers that are interviewed in the documentary, they discuss that it's really an uphill battle to improve the basic conditions of these prisons, let alone trying to introduce new programs and resources. One policymaker that was interviewed noted how because the poor conditions are part of the punishment, rehabilitation is a secondary concern. Numerous inmates, former members of this program, note how so many of them really do want to change. However, it's very difficult to change in an environment that encourages division and segregation. What's very impressive about this program is that it's incredibly successful. Once the men graduate as substance abuse counselors, they rarely ever reoffend, they rarely ever come back to prison. In addition, prison officials have noted how the program has had a positive effect in the prison in general. I think what I appreciated about this documentary is that it's very focused on its subjects and not so much trying to unpack the system and this prison, like America as a whole. The documentary solicits so much personal information from these men, and you come to realize that it's never one decision. It's an accumulation of smaller decisions that lead to someone landing in prison. It's far bigger than just a single moment. And of course, these decisions are sometimes out of your control. They can be influenced by friends, family, or an environment that, as hard as you try to navigate, just sucks you in. I also like how the documentary uses their trauma to highlight their strength. The film has to overcome a number of issues. First, these men were former criminals, and second, they have undergone a level of abuse in their personal lives and as children that the average person watching may not be able to comprehend or understand. So the documentary tries to not just talk to these men, but to show you what their lives are like, follow them around while they're working, they're preaching, talking to their parents, talking to their friends. And as a result of that, as an audience member, you're able to empathize with them and relate to them in some way. It's sad to say, but when someone has committed a crime or they have experienced a level of trauma that maybe the average person cannot relate to, we sometimes believe that the individual is either beyond redemption or just simply too damaged to contribute to society in a meaningful way. And the documentary tries to remove that stigma by showing you that neither of these assumptions are true. And with the right resources and with the right programs, anyone can change their life for the better. Overall, I highly recommend this documentary. I think what I appreciated about it is that it doesn't try to lecture to you or preach to you in any way. Instead, it highlights a program that is working through people whose lives were changed by it. In doing so, you leave the documentary hoping that the program continues and that it inspires similar programs that facilitate meaningful change. So if you have a chance to catch it, I strongly recommend you do. Again, stylistically, it's very, very impressive. And you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.